So, Bill Wirtz, welcome to Conversation with Rob. So, just a little background on Bill. Bill is a Luxembourgish law student and journalist who writes for Fee and Freedom Today and many other publications. I'm not going to name them all. You can go and look at his blog. And Bill likes to ironically point at things through his social media and gives me a lot of giggles. I have to say, I really enjoy what you put up on on your social commentary. So yeah, welcome to Conversations with Rob.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me for the first edition. And for the people who don't like me, unlike what you see on social media, I'm actually a really nice person. But yeah, no, I have a mixture on my social media between stuff that I write and then just me provoking people or just giving food for thought, and just if something I wrote makes you stay up at night, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'm aiming for.
Yeah, and the type of people that get your goat up are like, I seen you wrote last week about slow walkers. You also have a little thing for clean eaters. Do you want to tell us what your problem is with clean eating?
Yeah, it's something I discovered not because of reading articles online. It's because I, through Instagram, which is something I use occasionally, but especially when traveling. And then I see pictures, like people always, that's how Instagram started, right? On people taking pictures of their food. And now they all hashtag this clean eating thing, which was completely unknown to me. Because it seems like such a weird thing, was my food dirty before? And that's kind of the implication that people are trying to give. So it's this sort of showing off in terms of what I'm eating, but most people who use it don't really know what it's about. It's clean eating. So basically, clean eating is a sort of nutritional concept in which you have to, do the stuff that we've been telling people for 50 years, just eat fruits and vegetables and don't eat too much meat and avoid this and that. It's just that now this semantic difference has given people the idea that what the other people are eating is just very unhealthy. And then I was sort of criticizing that idea because that's why people reject GMOs and that's why people try to overregulate the food industry, which costs more money to poor people who have to spend.
Exactly.
You have to, they have to spend the money on what we are regulating, right? So yeah, I don't want to get too much into detail on this, but every time there's sort of this popular social movement where it suffices to just put a hashtag after it, I might be a bit suspicious. It's just too easy, right? It's just it's just a hashtag, right?
Oh, absolutely. So the organic crowd, I would consider myself not so much a clean eater. I don't really like that term, but I would eat healthily. I would try to buy organic and not always, like not everything that I would eat would be organic, but I try to avoid as many pesticides as possible. My partner is a nutritionist, so we like to eat healthy enough.
You don't really get the choice, right?
Exactly.
But like, I mean, what are people thinking? Do people have this impression that the food companies, they sit in their basements and think, how can we poison the general public today, right? No, it's nobody wants to poison you.
They want to make money.
Yeah, of course they want to make money, and if you die, they don't make any more money on you, right? No, it's people. I mean, you can be suspicious, but there's a point in which when you start telling me what I can buy and cannot buy in a store, that's where I go, well, can we stop here? I mean, if you, it's the same thing for the non-GMO people. If you really believe that GMO food is bad for you, which is not supported by any scientists in the world, you just buy the non-GMO food, right? There's no issue that you don't have to criticize me for it. If I buy it, apparently it's my problem then, right? So live and let live, but that's something really controversial to people, it seems.
So let's talk about your writing. You obviously are the one of the blog editors with Students for Liberty, which we're both part of, and you're prolific there. But you're also prolific on your blog, and you write for a lot of, as I mentioned, Fee. And since today, congratulations, Freedom Today. So tell us what your shtick is. What exactly is it that you like to write on and write about?
Well, maybe I would have to go back and like tell you about how it started. It started a few years ago when I was a student in secondary school, and I read this article in a Luxembourgish newspaper, and I thought, well, that article was just really stupid. So what I did is I ring up the newspaper, and I say, well, your article is really stupid, and they said, well, that's. And then I felt a bit retarded on that note, because it seemed like I was just one of the angry readers who just rings up the newspaper, doesn't really do anything. So they said, I mean, if you write a good response to it, we'll publish it. And I said, well, that's a good idea. So I did, and they did publish it, and I got a whole page. And I thought, well, if that works once, why wouldn't it work again? So that's how I started off, and eventually started a blog. And yeah, and the more I discovered libertarianism, I discovered that you can reach an immense amount of people through these articles. What I like to tell people is that you have to realize that on average, more or less, or have direct contact with people that you speak to on a regular basis throughout your life, about 1,000 people, right? So that means that with the intermediate of one person, you have access to 1 million people, and through the intermediate of 2 people, you have access to 1 billion people. So if you just get one person to tell that to all of their friends, and then another one, you can reach 1 billion people. Now, of course, that's simplistic, but we have the possibility to be a medium today. So I thought, well, if I can get that online, and I can explain the ideas as easy, like as comprehensively as possible, then that should work. But obviously, it's not that easy. You can't just, if you write 10 pages about something that you think is very comprehensive, nobody's going to read it. So obviously, there has to be more to it. And for me, the idea was, well, if I provoke people a little, if my title sounds counterintuitive, like why the petroleum industry saved the whales. That kind of stuff obviously gets people clicking, and then maybe they'll click on the other stuff as well. So yeah, so my philosophy is really get libertarianism mainstream, and give people the confidence to support these ideas.
And recently at LibertyCon, you gave a lecture about writing and blogging and journalism in general. A picture I saw of you in the background, read more than you write. That's an interesting concept. Do you want to say more about that?
Well, I would say that's rule number one. If and unfortunately, most journalists don't do this anymore, because then their articles would look very differently. Like what I do all day is not just sit here and just write with the ideas that come up. No, it's a collection of thoughts that I get by reading and listening to outlets all over the place. And that's why you shouldn't single out one. Libertarians have the same problem on this. If I look at my news feed, I have like too many libertarian pages and people who agree with me, and I'm in my bubble. And if I look at my news feed, it's just going to be all the same things. And that's something you should avoid, because you should read the newspaper, your local newspaper, which is super left-wing. Because if you don't understand what their argument is, how will you refute it, right? So reading more than you write, first of all, gives you all the information, gives you all the kinds of arguments that people are going to give you. And if you respect that, if you read, for each article that you write, you read 20, you're going to be fine in terms of what you're talking about. And that, I think, is something that we see lost in the modern day journalist or people who do commentary. It seems very easy. It seems very obvious that you should do your research and read, and people really don't do it. Like, one example is, if you read an article on a popular news site today, be that New York Times or the Washington Post, eventually you do find a hyperlink, but it's very rare in the article that you click on. Why should I believe them just because it's the New York Times or just because it's Washington Post? No, that's not how I think it should work. You should believe it because I can actually source this, and I can say, well, I got this from here. So the bigger the news outlet, the less they think that they actually need to do that. But I think it's essential. It's essential for me as a blogger, and it's essential for the big media outlet.
Absolutely. You're studying law in France, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
oh, yeah.
we're getting close to the election now. You have an interesting concept and outcome that you mentioned to me a while ago. That if Le Pen gets, what is it? If Le Pen gets elected,
yes,
but the other crowd get into the.
Well, yeah, I mean, the parliamentary elections in France are 2 weeks after the general election, the presidential elections. Meaning that if you're the president, doesn't mean you can just do whatever. You have to get a majority in parliament in order to govern.
Yeah.
Now, according to the polls, the problem is that the last polls for parliamentary elections were done a year ago. Marine Le Pen would get between 50 and 60 seats in parliament. Out of 577. So she's very far off from getting a majority in any way. And she's also very far off to having, any sort of sufficient support in the other parties. You have a few radical center-right Republicans, but it's definitely not enough to create a government. So my suggestion to French people is if you're a libertarian, or if you believe that, the government should definitely do less, is don't even vote in the presidential election, because that doesn't matter. There's just 11 anti-capitalists running, so that's really doesn't make any sense. Go to the parliamentary elections, because you have considerably more impact there, because considerably less people go vote. And in your region, you just vote for whoever is the most ideologically opposed to the president that got voted in 2 weeks before. Because the more opposition he has in parliament, the less power he has in doing anything. So yeah, I mean, if Marine Le Pen gets elected president, just vote for somebody diametrically opposed to her, and then you will be in a situation which the French call cohabitation. So the parliament is a different party color than the president, and for the next 5 years there will be not too much policy change, which for France is not too much of a bad thing.
So a stalemate, yeah. In terms of, back to LibertyCon, we did an interesting thing, myself and yourself, on the first night. We compared the regulations in Ireland to the ones in France. Now, I have to say, I didn't think anything could be worse than Ireland, but France seems to win the regulation battle. It's what was the winner, the one that was just a kicker?
The last one, obviously, was the fact that in France it is you cannot make an ad where you show happy children with Down syndrome. Now that is because women who aborted their children because they had Down syndrome would have a bad conscience about that. So that's the kind of policy making that you see in France. From the perspective of a few people, the law seems very well intentioned, but it's just ridiculous given from the outside view. And you have quite a lot of those. We have banning for ads for tanning beds. You cannot. Yeah. Vaping is as regulated, although that's now an EU directive. But yeah, but politicians make rules if they see a certain problem, but they don't see the counter reaction behind it. So yeah.
So let me ask you a question about when you do finish up with your law degree in France. How are you going to save the world, Bill? What's
in my work, or like how?
Absolutely. Like, where are you going? Like, where are you going to? Obviously, you're a super smart guy. How are you going to save the world? No pressure, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. Like, it's I mean, what I have identified, and I'm definitely not the only person, is this: in libertarianism, there's two kind of people. There's the don't tread on me libertarian, and there's the don't tread on anyone libertarian. The don't tread on me libertarian doesn't really care about what his surrounding or even his own social circle thinks about libertarianism or the ideas of liberty. He just lives besides government as much as he can. He evades taxes, or he builds his house without a permit and tries to get away with it. And there's people, I would say more or less like me, who try to convince the everyday person that at least more liberty would be a good idea. How do I get that in my work life? I don't really know. If there would be as much money in the liberty movement as there is in socialist parties and unions. I think I would easily find a job in that.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not the case, because unlike what our ideological opponents think, we are not showered in money. So I don't really know what if I get my bachelor's in law. I'm probably going to switch, and I don't really want to become a lawyer. I want to maybe do in terms of political communication or lobbyism. I still have to see what kind of degrees there are, because that's unfortunately what you need today. Because it's not really about your competencies; it's just about what degree you have. And that's also a very unfortunate movement that we have today, because people don't really want to let you work anymore. Before, companies would just hire you and go like, "Well, we can give you an internship." And then we'll see how well you do. But today, if you don't even have a degree, there's absolutely no way.
Well, I don't know. I'd push back a little bit on that. Like Derek McGill was at LibertyCon, and he is the marketing guy at Praxis. And what they say is that you have to provide a decent value proposition to a company to make yourself attractive for them to employ. So I think, like, even without a degree, that you would be able to provide a value proposition for, like, writing. You're an incredible writer. I like to read what you have to say. So I think that you'd be able to provide value there.
Oh, definitely. In the writing department, that is actually, fortunately, still the case, because people don't really require you to be to have a bachelor in journalism or anything of the sort. So that's good. And in that place, we still have people still read what you you can still pitch an article, and they can still accept it. So that's all right in terms of writing. But the problem is obviously how many possibilities are for me to continue in what I do now. It pays a few rents, but it's not enough to make a real living out of it. Apart from starting my own thing, which is as difficult as it is today, because we are on this transition period. Nobody really buys a newspaper anymore.
Yeah,
but people haven't really accepted the idea of paying online for the either. So we are in this transition period where I think we're going to get out of it. I think that the next generation is definitely going to be more willing to pay, I don't know, €8 a month to have a subscription to a sort of an online news outlet. I think that's gonna arrive at one point. But I think this transition period is very difficult for the writers and for the outlets, because nobody really knows what to do at this point.
Yeah, like, where is the world going? Like, we see this madness happening in Syria, and Donald Trump retaliating. This is...
Are you going to go there? Are you just going to ask the question about the most difficult geopolitical conflict?
Well, this is what I'm sort of trying to tie together. Like, what sort of world are we going to live in, 3 to 5 years from now? This could escalate massively, potentially. I don't know what's going to happen, really.
Well, one thing is for sure, I don't want to be a history student 10 years from now, because if I have no idea how this whole Syrian conflict works, and I have sort of an idea from listening to the news, but even in the news, nobody really seems to know how many opposition groups there are, and who do they work for, and how much is conspiracy theory and how much isn't. Having to analyze that in 10 years as a history student is going to be awful. Yeah. So I'm really feeling for those people, because it's not the Napoleonic Wars. It's not two armies standing in front of each other. It's considerably more difficult to understand and complex. So,
I would say impossible.
Well, not impossible, because we can figure. I mean, we were able to figure the Cold War out, right? In terms of history books, it's not perfect, but we got most of the facts right.
Well, so, if you look at the way that they're all positioning themselves now and saying that's fake news, what legitimizes non-fake news in a historian's mind? Who do they trust?
Didn't we have that during Cold War as well? I mean, we had that too. We had false information, and then we had to single it out. All of these movements are not new. It's the same way that it's actually a good transition to wrap it up. The clean eating thing is also not new. The clean eating thing was called clean living 100 years ago, and people just said, well, you shouldn't smoke and you shouldn't drink alcohol and all that. It's the same thing. And we have the fake news idea is the exact same thing. We just before we're doing Cold War, we called it Russian propaganda or Soviet propaganda. It just got different means. It's the same way that we don't have more bigotry with people. We just have people just got a voice and they got out of the bar and now they can voice it on Facebook and you just see it a little more. But the amount of bigotry between people, like how people express themselves, hasn't really changed.
Mm.
So I don't know. The same way that we see the difficulty now to analyze the situation that we have, we're just going to be better at that too in a few years. So I'm maybe too optimistic, but yeah, we'll figure it out.
I like it. I like that optimism. How can people find out a little bit more about you? Where will I direct them to?
Well, I have a blog on which you can find all my articles, which is Wirtz Bill, so WIRTZ bill.wordpress.com. But you can also find my author profiles on the Freedom Today network, or on FEE, which is the Foundation for Economic Education. You can also find me on Twitter or Facebook. I'm always happy to get messages from people, especially readers.
Excellent. Thanks for popping my podcast cherry.
Well, it was a real pleasure, and it was way too short. But yeah, I'll hope to be back.
Absolutely. Adios.
Ciao.